Hello, Robert Kiyosaki. I'm the best known for the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And today I'm going to talk to you about a very important subject. It's called asset protection. As you can see, sitting behind me is a big picture of a medieval castle. And the reason the rich have always had to have castles is because people always want to steal from you. Even today, some people are always stealing, lying, cheating, scamming. They go to court, you get lawsuits, you do all of this stuff. Because people are people. I don't care where you are, what country you're in, there's always people who will cheat, lie, and steal. And as the economy worsens, it gets worse. So anyway, I thought I'd talk to you about asset protection, because if you're planning to be rich, you better build castles behind you. But today, we don't build castles with rock and stone. We build them with attorneys. And so I don't mean to be arrogant or flippant, but I was watching, Occupy Wall Street. All these people were yelling and screaming about the big corporations. They say they're ripping us everybody off. Well, that's your point of view, but this is my attorney here. His name is Garrett Sutton. He's a Rich Dad advisor, and he says start your own corporation. And the reason you want to start your own corporation is you're planning on being rich, you better build a castle. Because if you are stupid, like my poor dad, my poor dad was a great guy, but he lived in another era. He always said, my house is in my name. He was so proud of that, very middle class, The house is in my name. Well, my rich dad had corporations, and his house was inside a corporation, or an entity, as they called. My poor dad always said, my car is in my name. And my rich dad would say, my corporation owns my car. And the reason they have corporations is because they're like these castle walls. Because I don't care if we're medieval or into the future, people will cheat, lie, and steal. Some of your best friends. One of my business partners, bless his soul, he just passed away, but he found that his wife was stealing from him. I'm going, holy mackerel. She cleaned him out, and then, thank God he could get his money back. And then she sued him for divorce on top of it. So, this is the kind of world we live in. So you better have a castle. So Start Your Own Corporation is a book about asset protection. So one big thing that I've already covered with you is I don't have too much in my name. I don't want anything in my name. Because anything's in my name, some scumbag, some cheat, lie, steal, crook, hi, I'm here, I'm your friend. Yeah. They'll steal and lie. They'll steal from you. So anyway, you've got to protect yourself, and that's what this book's about. And the way the rich do it is through specialized attorneys like Garrett Sutton of the Sutton Law Center, but Start Your Own Corporation. If it hadn't been for Garrett's protection, years ago, 20-something years now, I'd have lost everything. So the point here is this. If you're planning on being rich, get this book. Read about it, understand it. Build your own castle walls. It doesn't cost that much, probably $1,000 to start your own castle. But you've got to have good legal advice, good accountants, and I trust Garrett implicitly. We've tested time now. I've been hit so many times, but they just bounce off those walls. I think it's kind of funny, personally. Because in my world, the world of, let's say, the rich, the 1% that Occupy Wall Street is not happy with, is the person that sues loses. In other words, the person that sues me loses. Now, if you can imagine that, I want you to think about that for a little while. You hear about the frivolous lawsuits and all this, but the real heart, in most cases, the person who does the suing loses. This is not what you think it is in the real world. So please pay attention to asset protection, because there's no sense attempting to get rich when the world is filled with scumbags. People who will lie, cheat, steal, marry you, rape you, do whatever you want for your money. Remember this, in desperate times, desperate people do desperate things, and we are in desperate times. So cover your assets. Once again, Robert Kiyosaki here, and I'm talking about a very important subject. It's a subject about people trying to steal your money. And as you know, in court system, they say you're innocent until proven guilty. That's not really true. In the real court system, and I've been in a number of times, you're guilty until your attorney can kick the other attorney's ass. That's the way it really works. I'll tell you something, I'm so disappointed in our court system and the jury systems, you have no idea. You could be perfectly innocent, you've done nothing wrong, but somebody can accuse you of something you haven't done and still win. So if you think that there's really justice in the legal system, you better dream on. So that's why I recommend this book here, Start Your Own Corporation, by my personal attorney here, Garrett Sutton, the guy that builds my castle walls. You've got to be very, very careful today to cover your assets and your wealth. So again, as I said before, there's two things. Number one is you got to protect yourself from the scumbags who want to steal your wealth, people that want to sue you for anything. So recently, about 5 years ago, I had a friend who was in a partnership. And the worst thing you can be in business is in a partnership. You go to an accountant and say, oh, put yourself in a partnership. That's the worst thing you can do. You've got to put a corporation or something behind you. So what happened was this guy, they built this big business over 20 years, they were pretty wealthy. And so his partner's daughter, who was now 19 years old, got drunk, and with his car, because it was in his name, hit somebody and killed somebody on the sidewalk. So because his partner's daughter got drunk and killed somebody, the father of the person that was killed came after both of them. So both partners lost everything. So this is the lesson. You ask accountants for tax advice. You don't ask accountants for legal advice. So when you read the Rich Dad Company's work and all this, I always say you have to have the best advisors. So Garrett is my corporations attorney. He's my legal guy. He builds my castle walls. Tom Wheelwright is my tax guy. So you got to have at least two, one accountant, one attorney to cover your assets out there, because the government's going to come after your money and the desperate people out there will come after your money. So that's what I'm saying. You've got to have at least two people, an accountant and attorney. Please be very careful, because there's a lot of bad advice out there. Again, if it had not been for Garrett, I would have lost everything. I would have lost everything. And all it cost me was about $1,000 to build a castle wall. So this is the big point here, is this. Choose your accountants and attorneys carefully. But the bigger problem is this. Many people ask for advice, tax advice, from somebody who's not an accountant. And they ask for legal advice from somebody who's not an attorney, like their brother-in-law or their father-in-law. That's why so many poor people are poor, is they ask idiots for tax advice and legal advice. You'd be surprised how many people out there are being screwed because of bad advice. Well, tell me what I should do. He said, well, you should do this. I said, well, are you an attorney? No, but I'll give you some advice here. Please, this is your greatest asset over here. If you're going to take advice, please be very careful who you get the advice from. That includes me too. So once again, we live in dangerous times, desperate times, a lot of desperate people, and desperate people do desperate things. That's why you need the best advice possible, both taxes and legal advice. Because remember, you've got to be responsible to cover your own assets. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the benefits of having your own castle. But in this case, it's having your own attorney with a corporation. And when I was a lot younger, 50 years ago, whatever, I started finding out that most castles are actually sitting in some attorney's drawer. They don't really exist in stone. They're just these legal documents that cover your assets. And for years, I kind of knew about asset protection, but if I didn't have any money, I had no asset to cover. You know what I mean? So I would go to these asset protection classes and listen to these guys. I said, well, when I have assets, then I'll buy a corporation. But that is really stupid thinking. And thank God I was lucky enough. So as my wife Kim and I were building our assets one day, and we said, well, someday we'll put a corporation around them. And we're living in Phoenix here. And we had quite a bit of wealth by then. We maybe, weren't making that much, probably $100,000 a year on positive cash flow, probably a couple of $1 million in assets. But we're always going to cover our assets someday. And then one day, a tenant did a really good favor, because all of our properties were in our name. Now listen to this. I said it in the last presentation. You don't want anything in your name. My poor dad, oh, my house is in my name. My car is in my name. You're so proud of it. Well, if it's in your name and you hit somebody with it, you get sued. You lose everything. You know, you got to be very careful today. So Kim and I at our house, we now got quite a bit of money, and this tenant comes by because our property was in our name. It was only a small 30-unit apartment house. And this guy knocks on our door, and he says, da 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 da. And I said, how did you get my address? He says, your name's on it. Your name's on the property. I'm going, oh. And all the stuff that people were telling me for years about don't have anything in your name came. I said, if this guy can find me, he can sue me. So there's two things you want to protect yourself from. Number one are lawsuits, and number two are taxes. Because the two biggest predators in the world are scum who want to sue you for their mistakes, and two is our own government. We're scum also, most of them. But anyway, you know, they're going to tax you. So if you want to pay less taxes and have more asset protection, you know, I think Garrett only charges about $700 for a castle. That's all. And probably a couple $100 a year to maintain the castle. But it gives you the sense of protection. Think of it as insurance. You know, you don't drive your car without insurance. You know, you don't own a house without insurance. Yet most people have their possessions without insurance on it. That's really stupid. You know, at least start with homeowners insurance. You should have that. But when you start to get wealthy, you need different types of insurance. And corporations are that different type of insurance for rich people. So please don't be stupid. You know, build your own castle for about $1,000 or less. You can have your own castle, protect your assets, but you got to play the game smarter. Because as I said before, in desperate times, and these are desperate times, desperate people do desperate things. So cover your assets.